Welcome back to Let's Clone. My name would be Toast, and this is a very quick episode. All we're going to do is throw another copy of the player into the game. We're going to use him as player 2, but instead of giving him all of his own sprites and throwing in more images than we need, we're going to use a very simple shader to swap all of his red and blue pixels. So we're going to have a homie with red balloons, a homie with blue balloons, and the ability to control both of them on your keyboard. Let's go. First things first, we're going to go into our player input, and we're going to say switch based on argument 0. We're just going to pass an argument, either a 1 or a 2 for player 1 or player 2. We're going to give us, let's see, a case we are player 1. All this stuff, break. It's all the code that we already had. Now we're going to give case for player 2. It's going to get the same variables, but we're going to call them a different way. Here we're going to have ord. In quotes for right is going to be D. I think these need to be double quotes. Just copy all this so I can type as little as humanly possible. For up, we're going to hit the dubs, and for left, we're going to hit the A. Neat. Now we're going to go into our player 1, and we're going to give him the pass of being first player. We're going to duplicate player 1. Oops, that is not the way to do that. Command D on a Mac, hit player 2, open up his step event. He's going to get the second input. Now we need to create a shader for him. So let's just build the shader swap red blue. Swar. I think I did that when I was coding it out the first time too. Shader swap red blue. Let's go in here first to actually call it. So we're going to be drawing ourselves as usual, but we want to do something before we draw ourselves and before we draw all these guys. We're going to draw set shader. No, get rid of that draw. My order is all backwards, my guys. Shader set. That's what we want. We're going to pass in the shader that we just created. We're going to draw all this stuff, and then we want to reset the shader so it doesn't apply to anybody else. Shader, reset. Now if we run this game, it'll compile, it'll work just fine, but we're going to have two homies, both with red balloons, and ain't nobody got time for that. So if we go down to our shader script, we can ignore for this part the vertex shader. This, I believe, has to do more with the position of the sprite and moving those vertices around. It's gonna, from what I've read, I haven't played with it too much, it's gonna get ruined if you try like printing a stretched or expanded sprite. I don't think we have to worry about that at all. We're gonna drop into our fragment shader. This has to do with the actual pixels being drawn to the screen and how we want to manipulate those. So there's very little that we have to add to the shader. Shaders can become very complex, and there's very few things that you can do that are this simple, but this is one of them. And I'm learning a lot about shaders myself, so I can't do anything too fancy quite yet. But I do know that in the shader, it's a different language. It's subtly different, but kind of majorly different in some ways. It's being written in a way that the graphics card can read it directly, if I understand it correctly. And it needs to be a little bit more picky. For instance, you have to use your semicolons and you have to declare your variables. Those are the big ones that stick out immediately. So we're going to declare a float that's an integer value that also stores a decimal place to it. Even if you're using a real number like 1, you've got to include the decimal, otherwise it's going to get pissy. We're going to use a float to hold on to our red value. We're going to do that by calling texture, two-dimensional. We're going to grab our GM base texture, and we're going to give it this VV text chord that we've been passed from the vertex shader. So V underscore V text chord. And we're going to hit a dot R on there. This, I guess, matrix or vector has 4 values to it. It has a red, a green, a blue, and an alpha. We're only trying to grab the information behind the red. So we're going to grab the red, we're going to grab the blue, and we're going to hold them into their own places accordingly. Now, all we have to do is 2 more lines of code where we set these to be the flop of each other. So we're going to take the GL frag color, we're going to take its red value, we're going to set it equal to what we were holding as blue. Then we're going to take our GL frag color, we're going to grab its blue value, and we're going to pass it the red. There's not very much that you can do in a shader that only uses 4 lines. And we could only do this in 2 if we just placed that over here, but I kind of like declaring variables and using them as such. But yeah, let's run the game, and let me just, I had changed something because I was goofing around. Move this back down to here to reset the shader so the guy who's walking around the corner doesn't look like player 1. And we should be good to go. Controlling the left guy with my right hand, the right guy with my left hand. So we're just gonna try to do one at a time. But we've got our little red boy flying around, sliding around. Now we've got a little blue boy flying around, sliding around. And you can see what I was talking about before, where the red guy has a red pigment to his skin, blue guy has a blue pigment to his skin, a little smurfy, but it's fine. Now let's just get his sprite duplicate as he's peeking around. See, even this guy over here is rocking the blue face, and this guy is rocking the red face. It's an easy way to not use a bunch of extra assets and to get the second guy into our game. He responds to everything else just the same. I hope you like this quick little part on how to use shaders. I'm learning a lot more about shaders, and I'm going to be using them in a lot more of my projects, but I thought this was an easy way and something that was worth throwing into our balloon fights. So we did. Thank you very much for watching. This is Let's Clone. I would be Toast. See you next time.